Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So obviously the boxing world is still reacting to Naoya Inoue's spectacular win over Stephen Fulton. Of course, he knocked out Fulton in 8 rounds to become a unified champion at Super Bantamweight, and in doing so becoming a 4-weight world champion. Pretty impressive stuff, if you ask me, and if you ask any regular boxing fan who just likes to see good fights. Now, like many of you, I was looking forward to this fight for quite some time, and as were most hardcore fight fans, and when this fight was first signed, it was mainly hardcore fight fans who were talking about this fight in the West. However, when fight week rolled around, all of a sudden this fight had many eyes on social media, and some of the narratives going around were very revealing to me. Very revealing. A certain sect of boxing fans, and I use the term boxing fans quite lightly, but a certain sect of fans were all of a sudden just completely shitting on Inoue. Labelling him as a hype job, a drug cheat, stacked raps, bad gloves, etc. You know, they were really throwing the shit at Inoue, metaphorically speaking. And it was just like a tidal wave of hate, and I think that word is used way too liberally in today's society, but most of these guys, because they are casuals, have no idea who Inoue is. They've heard of him, but they've not watched his career, they've not studied his career, they're not aware of the guys he beat, who he beat, when he beat them, etc., the world champions he beat. They just see a guy on highlights who knocks people out. He's a hype job, I've never heard of this guy, he's in Asia, he's fighting little guys, you know, this, that and the third. You know, they was painting the narrative that, you know, Inoue was a media creation. That was many of the talking points I saw on social media. And yeah, Stephen Fulton was supposed to go in there and expose him in many people's eyes, but this fight really kind of highlighted a lack of boxing knowledge among many people. And I know we all get things wrong, but the way I heard people describe Inoue, you would think they were describing Brandon Rios with power. It was just really strange to see guys talk about Inoue who I've never seen talk about him before, but they start with just, yeah, super disparaging comments, etc. But of course, Inoue proved these people wrong. And since then I have seen some people, you know, tuck their tails between their legs and, you know, begrudgingly give credit to Inoue through gritted teeth, etc. And immediately after the Stephen Fulton fight, I see people say, oh, Inoue needs to go and fight Tank Davis at 130. And things of that nature. And it got me thinking, it really did. Like, the bar for foreign fighters, when I say foreign fighters, I mean fighters who are outside the West. So not from the US, not from the UK, not from Mexico. Fighters outside the West, and the bar of expectations they are meant to meet, are so much higher than Western fighters. So much higher. And the reasons for scrutiny, or the bar for scrutiny, is so much lower than Western fighters. The glove or the hand wrap thing was a very good example. So we have the hand wrap debacle, and by the way, Inoue, just to prove a point, decided to actually, grant Fulton's or Team Fulton's request, and he wrapped his hands in the way in which Team Fulton wanted. By the way, the whole tape on bare skin thing, it's a bit of a misnomer. He doesn't put tape on bare knuckles or anything like that. He essentially puts the tape on, basically on his wrist, round his wrist and upper hand. It's not on his bare knuckles like many people were pointing out, kind of thing. It's basically just to strengthen his wrists, essentially. But anyway, he still wraps the hands like Fulton requested and still whoops his ass. You know, so he dispelled these low IQ individuals who said prior to the fight, that's where Inoue gets his power from, even though he's fought in America, he's fought in the UK where you can't do that. And yeah, it got me thinking as well back to the Terence Crawford-David Avanesian fight. In that fight, we literally saw a guy with defective gloves, therefore illegal by the way. Defective gloves are by definition illegal. We saw Terence Crawford knock out David Avanesian with defective, illegal gloves. Now, I'm not saying the gloves were tampered with, per se, but they were illegal. And, you know, if you mentioned it, then you were some kind of hater, you had an agenda, you hate Terence Crawford, you know, the usual diatribes in which they will levy at you. But he literally did knock out a guy with defective, illegal gloves. There's a lot more there than there was to Inoue wrapping his hands a certain way, which is not illegal in Japan, and I believe Texas also, and other states as well. But no, you know, there was a much bigger hoopla over the Inoue situation, more so than Terence Crawford knocking out a guy with illegal gloves. And yeah, for those who are saying those gloves weren't illegal, I mean, would Terence Crawford be allowed to start a fight in those gloves if they were torn like that? Of course not. Of course not. You know, there was a fight where Tyson Fury, I think it was against Christian Hammer, one of his gloves, the attachment from the thumb to the glove was actually torn, and they made him change the gloves, you know, because they were defective, therefore illegal. But no, you know, Terence Crawford just goes out there, knocks out a guy with illegal gloves. Nothing to see here. You're a conspiracy theorist for even just asking the question in regards to what happened and why was he allowed to fight with defective gloves. But again, it goes to show the double standards in regards to protected Western fighters in comparison to foreign fighters or non-Western fighters. The same goes for when a fighter pops in boxing, when he pops dirty. You know, if it's like a non-Western fighter, usually the energy's a lot more vitriolic in comparison to when a Western fighter gets popped. There are exceptions, of course, like Jarrell Miller, but for the most part, you know, guys like Roy Jones, James Toney, these guys are still celebrated. There was the whole Mayweather situation with some extremely shady goings on with IVs, etc. This was prior to the Pacquiao fight, and Mayweather was caught with an illegal IV. At the time, it was illegal, it wasn't declared. Then all of a sudden, retrospectively, after the fact, despite it not being declared, Mayweather was given a retrospective TUE, a therapeutic use exemption. But there's nothing to see there. Inoue, he complains once about being woken up by VAR testers. That's fishy. There's something going on there, guys. I don't know, man. The whole fight week to Inoue Fulton really just exposed these double standards and how, you know, Western fighters kind of have it easy in regards to what they're expected to do. To earn credit as a Western fighter, you have to do far less than, let's say, a guy like Inoue, who, by the way, is now a world champion at his 4th weight class, and people are asking this guy to go and fight Tank Davis at 130. Who's asking Devin Haney to fight at middleweight, by the way? And again, I see all this credit for Stephen Fulton. Oh, he was a road warrior. He travelled to Japan. Enemy territory. All this, you know, all this jazz. Cool. I like to see fighters travel. You know, that's good to see. Fair enough. But again, foreign fighters do this every other week in America. You know, fighting away from home in enemy territory. Actual enemy territory, because these guys get no favours in America. None at all. Japan is pretty fair for judging. Japan's actually is one of the easier places to go as a foreign fighter. Factually. There's very rarely robberies in Japan. Of course they happen everywhere, but not to the level of America or the UK. No way. A couple of judges gave Fulton 2 rounds in this Inoue fight. That is way too kind. I gave him 0. But he got 2 rounds, I believe, on a couple of judges' cards. Japan's one of the easier places to go. I wouldn't be all that worried going to Japan as an away fighter. They get it a lot more right than they get it wrong, especially in comparison, like I say, to America, to the UK, blah de blah de blah. And yeah, as I said, I found this whole fight week to be very revealing, quite frankly. And with that being said, let's talk about Inoue for a short period of time. I hope Inoue is wise enough to be self-aware enough that if this guy does travel to America, then it's very likely that he's going to get this same sort of treatment as other foreign fighters. The energy's there already. That's been plain to see this fight week. But unlike Kovalev, unlike Golovkin, unlike Lomachenko, this guy doesn't have to travel. Unlike Usyk, this guy doesn't have to travel. He's got something good in Japan. He's making silly money. I read he got paid as much as $10 million to fight Stephen Fulton. There's very few fighters in boxing who are earning that sort of money, let alone in those weight classes. Inoue doesn't need to travel. He needs to make the most of what he's got, because most foreign fighters don't have that type of support. They don't have that type of backing, you know, that marketability that Inoue does in that part of the world. I don't want to see Inoue risk his legacy or risk his record. Not because I don't want to see him lose, that's the wrong mindset. I don't want to see him lose unjustly. I don't want to see the same old story that I've seen so many times in the last few years, like with Kovalev, Lomachenko, Golovkin, etc. I don't want to see it. And he doesn't have to have that happen to him. So for Inoue, I would suggest that he stays in Japan. Fight Tapales, become undisputed again at super bantamweight, maybe get a big fight with John Ryo Casemiro. That's a big fight in Japan. And even if he goes to featherweight, none of these guys can draw like Inoue. These guys have to travel. Inoue's promotion, they have the money to get these guys over, and I would suggest that is what Team Inoue should do for the foreseeable future. You know, no need to travel right now, because at super bantamweight, there's not really any other names in America aside from Fulton, and even with featherweight as well. You know, none of these guys can dictate to Inoue where to travel. I would make the most of that if I'm Naoya Inoue and his team. He's in a very unique situation in comparison to many non-Western fighters. And again, I think he should make the most of it. Again, I like it when fighters travel, but we've seen the way these guys get treated in America, in the UK. Is it worth a risk for losing a fight that everyone knows you won? Is it really worth a risk? Because, you know, we can demand that as boxing fans, but if we demand that, we have to be honest enough when these fights are robberies, but a lot of people aren't. A lot of people aren't, you know? So, yeah, if I'm Inoue, he's got a good thing going. Keep up with it, you know? Just keep fighting in Japan. That's personally what I want to see, because you know what you're going to get. You know more than likely you're not going to get a robbery. You know more than likely it's going to be above board. And yeah, that's how I want to consume boxing. That's what I want to see. I want to see as fair a fight as humanly possible. And I think we have a better chance of that if Inoue continues to fight in Japan. Yeah, maybe that would mean Inoue gets less credit among Western boxing fans and Western boxing media, but that's a price worth paying as far as I'm concerned. That's a price worth paying, because those who know what they're looking at will give the guy credit, and that's really all that matters, you know? And even if he fights in America, man, he can do what he wants. There's going to be the bar's always going to be higher anyway, so I'd fuck it off. I wouldn't even bother if I was Naoya Inoue, because, again, I'll say it again, if you're like an American fighter, Devin Haney is the perfect example. You can get a questionable decision over a past his prime guy who is 15, 18 pounds smaller than you on fight night, and that grants you pound for pound status. Despite that not being what the meaning of pound for pound even is. If you're relying on a controversial decision to beat a guy 15, 18 pounds smaller than you, who's past his prime, then you're more than likely not pound for pound. And again, you know, that's another double standard, right? Inoue has a hard fight with Donaire first time around. Clearly wins, by the way. Like, clearly wins. But, oh, Inoue got exposed. Donaire's washed. Even though Donaire was a monster puncher, bigger than Inoue, wealth of experience, was a world champion, by the way. Even though there was all those factors going into it, Inoue was exposed. Haney fights Lomachenko, who hadn't fought in a year, who was much, much, much smaller, nowhere near as big a puncher pound for pound as Daenerys. Haney gets a controversial decision. All the credit in the world. He's not exposed though. Inoue is, you know? We all know the double standards are there. It's just like, it's whether you're honest enough to acknowledge them, I guess, you know? It is what it is. Anyway, share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Delboy. Peace.